She paused in the hallway, shifting her weight from one foot to the other, and gave me that faint, almost automatic smile, the one that usually made everything feel easy. "Just a girl's night," she said lightly, as if it explained everything. "Nothing to worry about," she added without saying it. Her tone was calm, practiced, like she'd used it more than once, though I couldn't tell if that was my imagination. I nodded, telling myself it was fine. 5 years together had built a quiet trust between us, the kind you don't question. We had routines, shared jokes, and late-night talks that lasted until the streetlights flickered off. It had always felt solid, unshakable, still, as she walked out. Her coat brushing the doorframe, a small ripple of doubt hit me. Not the kind that makes you panic, just a subtle itch under the skin. The door clicked behind her, and the apartment felt slightly too empty. I sat on the couch, glass in hand, staring at the quiet shadows gathering in the corners. Something wasn't wrong exactly, but the feeling wouldn't leave, a minor offbeat in a song I thought I knew perfectly. I tried to ignore it, pretending it was nothing. I told myself trust was supposed to feel easy, effortless. But even then, in the silence of our living room, I noticed the way the air felt heavier after she left, how familiar spaces suddenly seemed just a little unfamiliar. A small, sharp note of tension had slipped in, and it hummed beneath everything else. We'd been together for 5 years, and most of the time, life felt like a shared rhythm. Weekdays were predictable, coffee in the morning, her leaning against the counter while I scrambled eggs, laughing at some inside joke only we understood. Weekends were slower, softer. We liked long walks, quiet dinners, and the kind of conversations that wandered through random thoughts until one of us fell silent and the other just kept talking, knowing silence wasn't empty but full of comfort. She had this way of making everything feel intentional. Even small gestures, the way she'd tuck my hair behind my ear, or leave a note on the counter that said, "Don't forget to breathe," felt like proof that she noticed me. Really saw me. And I loved noticing her in return. The subtle ways she reacted to things, the half smiles when she was amused, the way she wrinkled her nose at a song she didn't like. All of it built a language between us that no one else could understand. Her friends were a big part of her life, too, and I'd always accepted that. They had regular brunches, movie nights, little trips that I wasn't always invited to, but that was fine. I trusted her. It never occurred to me to question it, even when life threw small curveballs, stress at work, a missed deadline, a fight over something stupid. We handled it together. The apartment felt like a safe zone, a place where arguments ended with coffee and a cigarette on the balcony rather than slammed doors. That sense of security was almost addictive. It made it hard to notice the little oddities, the fleeting moments that didn't quite fit the pattern. Tiny things that now, in retrospect, were the first shadows creeping in around the edges. It started almost imperceptibly, like a song you half hear in the background. Certain nights, she'd disappear, saying she was going out with her friends, and I'd smile and wave, never thinking twice. But then I started noticing a pattern, not a glaring one, just tiny, almost forgettable things. The same weekend every month, the same vague phrasing when she described where she was going. A laugh that sounded different on the phone, a pause that lingered just a second too long before she said goodbye. I tried to chalk it up to coincidence. Life is full of coincidences. Maybe she just had favorite spots she liked. Maybe she called them girls' nights because that's what she'd always called them. But then one night, I found myself standing by the kitchen counter, pouring a second drink, realizing I was listening to the faint echo of the apartment after she left, too quiet, too deliberate. I couldn't explain why, but a small knot of unease tightened in my chest. I wanted to believe in the version of us that had always been solid. But belief isn't always enough. I started noticing the little gestures differently, the way she'd glance over her shoulder, the way her voice softened when she laughed at something I didn't hear. Nothing concrete, nothing I could point to, yet it all added up to this small, creeping itch in my mind, and strangely, it made me watch her more closely. Not in a way I wanted to admit. I wasn't looking for betrayal, I was looking for reassurance, some tiny anchor that confirmed she was still the person I thought she was. The deeper I looked, the more the familiar spaces of our life, the couch, the balcony, the hallway, seemed to hold secrets I couldn't name yet. It wasn't dramatic at first. just a few moments that didn't line up the way they should. One Friday, she mentioned going out with the girls, but the street she said she was heading to didn't match the tone of her usual stories. I shrugged it off at first, assuming she'd picked a new spot. But then the next week, it happened again. Same phrasing, same way of shrugging when I asked casually where she was going. My brain started mapping her nights like a calendar I didn't want to read, and the pattern was too precise to ignore. I caught myself scrolling through maps late at night, not to track her, not exactly, but trying to see if the spots she mentioned even existed. It was ridiculous. I didn't know why I cared. And yet, each time I mapped it out, my chest tightened a little. It was like trying to read a book someone else was writing, and the sentences were slightly off. I even started noticing tiny gestures during the day, how she'd glance at her phone when she thought I wasn't watching, or the way she'd hum a song she claimed to hate. It was small, almost meaningless, but it made the easy trust we built start to feel fragile, like it could crack under the weight of a single question. By the third week, I realized I was replaying conversations in my head, analyzing tone, pause, even the order of words. Every girl's night felt like a puzzle, each detail weighted with significance I wasn't sure it deserved. And the more I tried to convince myself it was nothing, the louder that tiny, nagging voice in my chest became, whispering that maybe things weren't as straightforward as I wanted to believe. By the fourth week, I was no longer just noticing patterns, I was anticipating them. Her girls' nights had a rhythm now, almost clockwork, and every time she left, I felt this tight knot form in my stomach, a mixture of dread and curiosity I couldn't shake. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was overthinking. But then came the first clue that felt tangible. She'd mentioned one of her favorite cafes, and for reasons I can't explain, I drove by that street one evening. The lights were off, the sign dim. Nothing was open. I checked again another night. Same result. My mind raced. She couldn't be meeting friends there if the place was closed. And the more I thought about it, the more other small inconsistencies slotted into place, the same excuses, the same vague names, the same tone. I confronted myself with what I thought was proof. Maybe she wasn't honest about her nights. Maybe the stories, the laughs, the friends, it was all a front. That possibility consumed me for hours. I replayed conversations, picked apart gestures, scanned text messages for subtle hints, anything that could confirm this suspicion. It felt like I had stumbled onto a secret she didn't mean for me to find, and yet, there was another voice, the quieter one, that whispered I could be wrong. That maybe this was coincidence, that maybe she had reasons she hadn't shared, reasons I'd never understand. But that voice was soft, and the evidence in my head was loud. That night, I went to bed staring at the ceiling, trying to imagine what reality looked like if my suspicion was true. It was a dark, twisting thought, but one I couldn't shake, and by morning, it had burrowed into every corner of my mind. By this point, it wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was a quiet obsession. I started marking her girls' nights on a calendar, mapping addresses, noting times, memorizing patterns like a code I was desperate to crack. Every week, I tried to rationalize it, telling myself that trust was still there, that this was just my imagination running wild. But the more I thought I understood, the less I felt I did. One evening, I noticed something small but out of place. The scent on her coat was unfamiliar. Not perfume, not her shampoo, but something almost sharp, metallic, that lingered even after she'd stepped inside and kicked off her shoes. I asked about it casually, and she laughed, deflecting with a story about a new coffee shop she'd stopped by. The laugh should have reassured me. It didn't. Then came the pattern of phone notifications. I didn't pry, but I noticed that the little bursts of light on her screen, the brief flashes that told me messages were coming, sometimes arrived in clusters, other times not at all. It didn't fit with the rhythm I'd charted, and my mind couldn't leave it alone. I began replaying every conversation, every casual remark, looking for hidden meanings, for signals I'd overlooked. The apartment, once a place of comfort, felt like it was closing in. Shadows looked heavier, silence stretched too long, and I found myself pausing mid-step, imagining what she might be doing, who she might be with. I didn't want to know the truth, and yet I couldn't stop searching. Somewhere in that haze, I thought I had pieced it together, believed I had discovered the answer that explained everything. It took one ordinary Thursday night to unravel everything. I wasn't looking for her, I was just restless, pacing the apartment, trying to make sense of the pattern I thought I'd cracked. And then I noticed something, again, small, almost mundane. A familiar car parked down the street, one she'd mentioned in passing weeks ago, but this time it was different. I followed, keeping a distance, heart hammering, telling myself it was just curiosity, nothing more. The place she walked into wasn't a cafe, a friend's apartment, or a bar. It was a community center, a local organization she volunteered at regularly, helping women who'd been in abusive relationships. That metallic scent I'd noticed. Cleaning supplies and sanitizer. The clusters of notifications on her phone. Group updates for the events she coordinated. All the vague addresses, the repeated phrasing, the carefully timed girls' nights. It was logistics. Planning, organizing, making sure the women she supported had safe spaces and schedules they could rely on. I felt a strange mix of relief and guilt, the kind that twists in your stomach and lodges there. Relief, because there was no betrayal. Guilt, because my imagination had spun lies into reality, convinced me she was hiding something she wasn't. The girl I'd doubted was the same one I'd trusted for 5 years, except now I understood the depth of her commitment, the care she'd quietly woven into her routines. Standing there, watching her help set up chairs and greet the women with warmth, I realized how little I had known, even after all those years, about the quiet ways she gave herself to others. I had spent so much time chasing shadows, I almost missed the light she'd been carrying all along. Coming home that night, the apartment felt different. Somehow bigger, quieter, yet heavier at the same time. I kept replaying what I'd seen at the community center, the way she smiled at those women, the careful patience in her hands as she arranged chairs and set out refreshments. Part of me wanted to tell her I knew, to spill everything I'd felt over the past weeks. But another part hesitated, realizing that admitting my suspicion might wound the very trust one had risked unraveling. I poured a drink and sat at the counter, thinking about all the small ways I had misread her. The repeated addresses, the metallic scent, the notifications, they were nothing like what I imagined. My mind had filled gaps with shadows instead of facts. I felt foolish, yet strangely awake, as if I had been given a lesson I hadn't asked for. When she returned, laughing softly from the hall, I greeted her with a smile that was real but cautious. We talked, but I kept my thoughts to myself, letting the warmth of her presence settle over the apartment. Trust wasn't broken, but it felt fragile, like a vase I'd held too tightly and now needed to handle with care. That night, I realized something else. The discomfort I had felt wasn't entirely her fault. It had been mine, too. My mind had woven stories faster than reality could keep up. And yet, even as I went to bed beside her, I knew the lesson wouldn't erase the suspicion completely, it would linger. Quiet and unspoken, a reminder that even in love, certainty is rare, and trust is something you must rebuild, day by day, gesture by gesture. Weeks have passed since that night, but I still feel it, a faint unease that surfaces at unexpected moments. I watch her move around the apartment, folding laundry or humming while she cooks, and I remember the weeks I spent imagining secrets, building stories from shadows. I know now that the truth was far simpler, far purer, than I could have guessed. But knowing it doesn't entirely erase what I felt. Sometimes I catch myself checking the calendar I marked, even though I know it's unnecessary. I catch myself analyzing the small gestures she makes, wondering if there's something I'm missing, something subtle that doesn't quite add up. Part of me wants to let it go, to fully trust again. But another part, quieter, insistent, wonders if that is even possible. I wonder if love can survive that kind of self-doubt, if trust can ever be fully rebuilt once your own mind has convinced you there was a reason not to believe. And I wonder, too, whether keeping my suspicions secret was fair to her, or if the quiet weight I carry between us is a kind of betrayal in itself. Some nights, I lie awake thinking about how easily our perceptions can twist reality, how quickly imagination can fill in gaps with stories that aren't true. I don't regret trusting her before, I can't, but I also don't feel completely innocent. And maybe that's the hardest part, knowing that sometimes, even when there's nothing to hide, doubt can linger long after the truth is revealed, leaving you to wonder whether love is ever free of shadows.